There you are.
Oh my God, it's being recorded.
It is. I mean,
It'd be held against me.
everything is being recorded these days, right? Oh, there's your beautiful guitar.
It's all right. I hope you went to the bathroom because it's going to be a 3 hour.
A
I have a
3 hour
lot to
tour.
say, Michael.
All right. Well, I am ready for it. Let me introduce you real quick then. Hey guys, how's it going? Michael Troy here. I am so excited today. Megaton Man Mondays. Here is the man himself, Don Simpson, with a follow-up conversation. Don has much to say about his upcoming projects and everything like that. So as you can see, Don is tuning his guitar. Maybe perhaps he will sing us a little tune. I don't know. The Megaton
You hear that?
theme song.
Can you hear it? It's Bach. You hear that?
I did hear that.
Huh?
Is that you're playing Bach?
Yeah.
Okay,
Can you hear
good. I can
Am I coming
actually.
through?
Yeah.
Was that yes or no?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
But I can't distinguish between can and can't. How you doing today? How's it? You're on the West Coast. I'm in the Eastern time zone. It's noon.
I'm good. We've had a lot of rain lately, but today there is no rain. The sky is clear and beautiful after nature has cleansed Los Angeles of its filth and smog and disgust.
How's the framing here? Does this look okay?
It looks good. I feel like the composition is good. You're framed very nicely by
Let me see if I'm on HD here. Let me just check view. I'll go full screen. Where are my don't want that. I want that. Okay, it's my webcam. All right, we're all set. Buckle up.
Buckle up. Here we go. Fasten your seatbelts, kids. It's going to be a bumpy ride. And so who are we talking to today? Dandy Don or Dubious Don?
Oh, what? Just Donald.
Just Donald.
People call me Dr. Don just to be sarcastic. But I don't care. Whatever you want.
I think Don will do just
I can
fine.
take it. I have a thick skin.
So do you want to tell everybody why you're on fire now?
Well, I'll just tell you that I'll just give you the update, which is that Gary Groth, Fantagraphics, has sent the book to the printer. This is the X amount of comics 1963 annual. And I'm going to pop in a lozenge in case I start coughing. It's a 96-page publication. It's going to a printer in China. We don't have a price or a release date yet. What the printer's going to do is tell the publisher when they can find press time. But we're looking at August. The price discussed, Gary's hoping about $20, so maybe $19.95, maybe $24.95, somewhere in that area. It's going to be 96 pages, 72-page story. And I didn't count the words, but it's like an 8,000 word afterword, which is already pissing people off. It's already doing its job. People are uncomfortable. They haven't even read the whole thing. And I'm hearing from people grumbling. So that's what that just happened a couple of days ago. It just went off to the printer. It's been designed. It's beautiful. And hopefully they got my last few little typo corrections. I haven't seen if those were implemented, but it was close to perfect. Nice cover, nice layout. A designer named C. Huang designed it. They've spent no expense was spared. It's going to be a beautiful publication, black and white, and it's going to finish the Silver Age. It's going to finish the 1963 saga. People are going to enjoy it, and also cringe. So that's what I'm
Well,
on for.
yeah, I mean, I reread the your afterword in anticipation of our interview, and honestly, I can't. Like, I saw, you know, you told me why people are up in arms, but I mean, I didn't think you really said anything too outlandish or outside of the realm of, you know, fact or what actually happened in life. So, why
I
are people?
posted, well, I posted, let me tell you, I posted the first couple paragraphs, and people have taken exception to my characterization of I mentioned the 1992 Spider-Man #1 and X-Men #1, and I described them as fake #1s. And this elicited an indignant response from no less than Kurt Busiek and Fabian Nicieza, who I've never met. Fabian, I worked with Kurt. Kurt gave me a job at Marvel, an assignment on Open Space when Carol Kalish was editor of this anthology. Anyway, it's a long story, but I know Kurt from the old days. And the funny thing is, I mentioned Kurt in the afterword, in the full afterword. So I emailed Kurt. I said, if you're going to be outraged by the opening paragraphs, you should at least read the entire essay. And I don't think he did. He wrote back, he said, oh, I'm not outraged. I'm not outraged. It's just, we're just talking. Oh, I think, oh, okay, fine. Sure, you're not outraged. But Fabian and Fabian accused me of just, you know, well, you're just trying to sell more books, you know. So it's still sparking indignation 30 years later. To say nothing of the Alan Moore fans and the toxic Alan Moore fans. I'm sure we'll hear from them. So I'll be quite honest with you. I will be greatly disappointed if this doesn't raise a few hackles, in addition to, you know, what I've already accomplished. It's
Well,
another feather in my cap.
Well, I think like just I mean, you have to admit it's kind of audacious for you to, you know, want to finish this 1963 annual that Alan Moore promised us 30 years ago. I mean, if any, you know, and a lot of people are saying that they're going to do it. You know, there's that like fan made project that's going on. Hopefully you beat them to the punch.
Right.
And I think you will
Well,
and have, but
yeah, you're talking about the giant size 63 project, which was kind of my idea, or it was an idea that I had floated with Steve Bissett, which was, you know, years ago, 2014, he had me do a 10-page N-Man story. Did I show you that?
yeah, actually I did. Or
So that
yes,
hasn't
you
seen the
did.
light. That hasn't seen the light of day yet. But Steve got his characters. They divvied up the characters. Rick Veitch got U.S. Agent, or USA, the Ultimate Secret Agent, and Horus, and so forth. And Steve got Hypernaut and the Fury and N-Man. So I did a 10-page story that I wrote and drew for N-Man. But I was talking to Steve, and you know, and I said, well, you know, why don't you guys just finish the annual? Because I had been away from comics. I'd been in academia and so forth, and I had not quite realized that the annual still was out there. Because there's a plot for the annual and so forth. And it's just all creators, right? It's not an evil corporation. Nobody went bankrupt. There's nothing tied up in lawsuits or anything. It's just 3 creators. Why can't you guys just get together like grown-ups? This is 25 years later, or 20 years later. Why don't you just do it? And he's, yeah, well, that's Alan, et cetera, et cetera. And he told me the whole song and dance. Well, I said, this is 2014 now. I said, well, why don't you and I just do the annual? We'll take your characters and we'll spoof Rick's characters, and I'll take the Splitting Image characters that I did in the 90s, and because they were supposed to team up, they were supposed to have a crossover with the Image characters. So we'll just use the Splitting Image characters. And he said, that's a great idea. That's great and wonderful. Why don't you go ahead and do it? It's like, well, I don't have the time right now. I'm teaching and doing other stuff. So 10 years pass, or nearly a decade passes. And then this Giant Size 63 comes about, and that was kind of what I was talking about. Steve licensed the characters to somebody named William Hoffneck, and they've got Dan Shaheen and a bunch of different people are doing an anthology, and it's still in the works. You think an anthology would be really easy to put together? I'm telling you, it's going to be years and years. So they're still working on their anthology. But in the meantime, a year ago, I just drew a penciled page, and it said, "Screw Al." Can we swear on your channel?
Yes. Please.
Hell, fuck Alan Moore. Here's the 1963 annual. And it was just a pencil drawing. And Steve went nuts. He shared it. He boosted it. It went kind of semi-viral. Certainly in terms of my following, it went all over the place. So I inked it, and then I did a couple more pages. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just making it up as I went along. Long story short, a year later, I had a finished 72-page story. Gary Groth was already committed. He's working on the Megaton Man Omnibus. So he said, "I'll publish this." Sure, no problem. So that's going to be the first thing that Fantagraphics publishes. Of course, I did King Kong for Fantagraphics way back in the day. I did Wendy Whitebread and the Anton Drek comics back in the day. So I have a long association with Fantagraphics. But the funny thing is that they had turned down Megaton Man back in the 80s. I have a couple rejection letters from Gary Groth. So I don't know why he came around. But now he's doing these publications. So it looks like we are going to beat Giant Size 63. I'm still looking forward to it. I'm still looking forward to Steve's his anthology. He was calling it the Not Comics UT. So it's the Not Comics anthology and the Endman story. And he's got paintings, he's got drawings, he's got text pieces, he's got a whole fictional universe that he talks about. But as I say in my afterword, there's still no reason that Alan Moore can't finish the 1963 annual for real. There's no legal prohibitions. I mean, people seem to still be alive. There was a plot written. And the basic point that I make in the afterword is that, Alan could sit down, read the old comics, the 6 issues that were published. He could read the plot. Somebody would have to pencil it. Jim Lee is the other scoundrel in the story. He never had any intention of drawing the 1963 annual. He just wanted to screw up Jim Valentino. That's another contention I make in the afterword. But I don't think anybody can disagree with that. It would take somebody to pencil the story. I did it. I drew my own 63 annual. It takes some time, but then you get Alan Moore, it takes him a weekend to write the dialogue, and you're all done. And he's complaining about not getting the rights to the Watchmen back, but he's completely abandoned 1963, which he completely has total control over. He just likes to hear himself complain, but that's another story. So what do you want to talk about?
I find it so interesting it's hard for me to feel sorry for Alan Moore when it comes to Watchmen, just because he originally wanted to use the Charlton characters and he would have had no ownership of them. So it would have all been moot if DC would have said yes to that. And now he's acting all butthurt over like some derivative characters. Like,
what was that? Butt hurt?
Yeah.
It's all butt hurt. Okay. That's interesting.
But he's left like a trail of ashes with his flamethrower burning bridges through his career, pissing off his collaborators and stuff. And it speaks to like what you just said. It would take nothing for him to come in and dialogue this stuff. It takes nothing for him to do a lot of the stuff he did, and he just still sort of shits all over the efforts of his collaborators and stuff. So.
Yeah, I don't think, nobody can plead poverty here. I mean, Alan was making a pretty good buck even when he was doing 1963. He made a good, 1963 never sold. I was the letterer. as you recall, this was the first thing that anybody ever saw of 1960.
Amazing.
And I tell the story. This is actually Marvel Comics Bristol board. And I did the logo and I said 1963 is coming, the triumphant return of Alan Moore. And some people have taken issue with that. Well, they said, well, he wasn't returning. He was still in comics. He did stuff after Watchmen and before 1963. I said, well, it says right here he returned, so he must have gone away. I mean, don't blame me. It was all hype, you know. Anyway, that was the first thing people saw of the series. What was my point? I forgot my point. Nobody can plead poverty. I mean, so 1963 did not sell as well as Wildcats #1. Wildcats sold 2 million, 2.5 million, something like that. Spawn sold 2.5 million. Youngblood sold whatever it sold. 1963 sold 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 copies. And then the first issue, after the first issue, it dropped off. But it was still a pretty good payday compared to Lost Girls or whatever Alan was doing. And it wasn't like he had to go work in a coffee shop or in a washing dishes to pay the rent. He just got more money because Jim Lee and the other members of the Image founders, the founding fathers, these were all people that I knew them. They walked the earth. They were mortal. They were not miraculous people. But Alan Moore was making pretty decent payday. It wasn't like he was going to lose the house if he took 3 days and wrote the annual. And in the case of a collection, there was supposed to be a collection that Rick and Steve had engineered. This is I don't know anything about this. This was all Rick's telling or Steve's telling. But all Alan Moore had to do was give permission, sign a piece of paper, and he didn't want to do that. So that never happened. It's never even been collected. But it would literally take a weekend to dialogue the annual, in my view.
Well, and you had mentioned in your afterword, I think that Jim Valentino supposedly has a plot from Alan Moore for the 1963 annual that he will never release. I mean,
yeah,
I wonder if it's any good. I mean, it's like with all the anticipation and all the stories and everything that has happened over the years. I mean, and it would be so crazy if Jim Lee did pencil it and it came out. I wonder, like, if it would be any good, if it would be a hit, if it would,
It won't be as good as mine. It won't be as good as mine. Clearly you can assume that Alan lost interest in the story. I also make the claim in my afterward that he probably didn't feel comfortable creating something. He'd rather end the world. He always brings the world to an end. He always has a cataclysm at the end of his stories. And 63 was intended, as I recall, and I remember talking to Steve and Rick in those days. I was doing the lettering on the first part of it. And they were hoping that this would launch a series of titles. They could have their own Marvel Comics group, but not have to deal with Marvel editors, not have to deal with DC editors, not have to deal with the lawyers and the copyrights and the 60 years of tradition and backstory. They just wanted to have fun, and Alan wasn't even going to be involved in things after a certain point. He would just collect a paycheck. Well, I don't think Alan Moore really feels comfortable with anybody carrying on his work. I mean, clearly with the Watchmen, he doesn't like people doing, after he's had his final word, he doesn't like other people mentioning it. But as you say, I mean, he's taking Charlton characters, he's taking the Joker, he's taken Batman, Superman, Batgirl, he's taken plenty of other characters and done his take on them. But he just doesn't want to pass it down, pay it forward, whatever the right word is. I don't think he feels comfortable with that. And I can understand that. I don't know what I would feel like if people did Megaton Man or Border Worlds or Wendy White Bread. I mean, I like having control of it, while I'm alive. After I'm gone, who cares? You know,
I
that's
mean,
my.
sometimes I just think of he's just like a super creative thief in a way, because it's like I was sort of like floored when uh I realized that he had ripped you off in Watchmen from Megaton Man with the on patrol sequence of Dr. Manhattan and Silk Spectre go on patrol in Watchmen #4. And a couple of years before that, you had done that in Megaton Man #4, and Alan Moore even told you he was going to rip you off.
And you can compare Watchmen #4 and Megaton Man #4. Just look at the covers. Look at
Oh,
the
there's no doubt. Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean,
look
even
at
using
the
the word.
because I use the word on patrol. He uses the word on patrol. When I met Alan Moore in 1985, I had already kind of done a parody of the Swamp Thing, and I think it was pretty clear he was reading my stuff. Because when I met him, he says, I'm going to rip off Megaton Man. Well, not really. I said, well, what do you mean? Well, it's, Dr. Manhattan is a nuclear character. It's a different take on a nuclear character. Okay, that's fine. And sure enough, he's using, my scene in Megaton Man #4, which came out summer of '85. Megaton Man is hooking up with the see-through girl, she's this, the wallflower of the Megatropolis quartet. It's like Superman meets the Fantastic Four, right? So they're hooking up, they're going on patrol, right? And they're off in the skyline. And sure enough, in Watchmen #4, Dr. Manhattan goes on patrol with what's her name, Nightshade or Willow Stalk or whatever her name is.
Silk Spectre. I was
Silk
going to call her
Spectre.
Silk Stockings. I'm just kidding.
Silk Stockings. And so they're smooching on the World Trade Center or the Sears Tower, whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, but here's the way I looked at it in the '80s, was that we were part of a friendly discourse, right? So I'm making fun of your comic and you're making fun of my comic, and we're trading ideas. And it wasn't just me and Alan Moore by any means. And I talk about this in the afterword, particularly by the 1990s. There was The Watchmen, there was 1963, there was Kurt Busiek and Astro City, there was Big Bang Comics, there was Image Comics itself was a universe, or was supposed to be a universe. So everybody's doing universes, right? Everybody, Big Bang Comics, everybody's doing. Rick Veitch would go on to do Rat Pack, Max Immortal. He had his own little universe, right? So we're all doing our little universes, and I was doing it through the roundabout means of parody. So Megaton Man, and even you could regard Normal Man as kind of an essay in universes, right? So Normal Man isn't just the title character. He lives in a world, and there's a whole bunch of teams and heroes. And Megaton Man lives in a world, and it's not just about Megaton Man, it's about the Devengers, and it's about the Quartet, and it's about Yarn Man and Tyranno Man and all these other characters. And I was doing this I carried this on in Bizarre Heroes. So by the 1990s, we're all doing these universes, and we're all doing our own little comics groups, right? 63 might have been the most explicit version of a Marvel Comics group. But we were all doing it, and I came through it through parody and through humor, but I had a serious intent when I was doing Bizarre Heroes. And what unified all of us, I think, and this is very serious, is that we wanted to start over creatively, not only in terms of being there at the beginning, right? We fake #1s. We wanted to start over and do it creatively and artistically, and not have to listen to New York editors, and not have to listen to lawyers, and not have to be concerned about copyrights and trademarks and having our stuff ripped off. Everybody in my generation knew about Siegel and Schuster being ripped off with Superman. Everybody knew about Jack Kirby being ripped off, Steve Gerber and Howard the Duck. He was completely screwed over by Marvel Comics, and everybody that got into the business in the 80s and 90s that that was conscientious of that. We wanted to make sure we weren't ripped off. We didn't want to give our work away to Marvel and have somebody else draw it. We wanted to control it. We wanted to say something, and we wanted to keep our toy rights, which is why I sympathized with the Image guys. You know, they were getting screwed over at Marvel, and they said, to heck with this, we're going to form our own company, and we're going to do our own X-Men and our own Spider-Man and our own vigilantes, and we'll just make up new names for everything. And that's what you're talking about when you talk about Alan Moore doing the Charlton characters. He's just thinly disguising or rearranging. He's taking the archetype, the mythological archetype, the mad scientist, the nuclear character, the shadowy detective character, the vigilante, the comedian or whoever. You just take these tropes and give them a new costume and a new name, and you tell your stories. But we weren't necessarily anti-superhero. We weren't against fantasy and imagination. Like some of the independents, the alternatives, they were they were underground anti-superhero muscle boy stuff. We were what's the right word, ecumenical about that, but we just wanted to control it. We didn't want to be screwed around with. We didn't want people to interfere with us. And that's the ironic thing about 1963 is that, and Image Comics in general, is that you get a bunch of creators, they break off, they do their own thing, but they still can't get along. It's like, what the hell? What the hell?
I think one of the, I think that maybe part of the controversy around some of your commentary is, people don't like the truth sometimes. And it's like, I mean, you can take it, it is what it is. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be a negative thing, but you were right. It's like, and that sort of might have been the beginning of one of the biggest problems with the industry. It's like when I was collecting comic books, I started reading X-Men with issue 263 or something like that. But that wasn't a deterrent for me. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my God, this amazing universe that I just discovered has like all these other issues that I can find. And like the Holy Grail is this number one. But if I come into comics now and I look at like Google X-Men number one, I'm going to see 500 different number ones and be like, which one is special? Why are there so many different number ones? It's like, why do they keep getting canceled? I don't know.
Well, the adjectiveless Spider-Man and X-Men, those were special number ones. That's why they sold millions of copies. I had a proofreader, one of the proofreaders at Fantagraphics said, Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man number one, that wasn't the first number one. What about Peter Parker and Spectacular Spider-Man number one? And what about the magazine in the 60s? And I said, well, that didn't, that wasn't hyped up as the rebooting of the whole franchise, which is why people bought Todd McFarlane's version. So, but, I'm expressing a polemical opinion and people are going to get rankled by that. So whether it's honest or not, it's at least honest. It's my honest truth. And I'm going to be disappointed if people don't get upset. Because people already before publication, people are already, it's filtering in like, why is Don Simpson, why doesn't he go away quietly? What's his problem? Why is he still at it? Why is he coming back doing this? And what does he have to say about, 1960? He was just a letterer, he must be pissed off about Impictopia, which I am.
The stars aligned. It's a 30-year anniversary. There's a lot to be said about that. You do have a connection.
I'm just a rascal. That's all.
You are. I found it interesting that you had mentioned that you were actually paid royalties for lettering 1963. I would imagine that those were fairly decent from an Image comic book. I mean, even though it had to be like the smallest percentage, since even though your your skill is beautiful and amazing, I mean, letterers really are the unsung heroes of comic book.
Well, you'll have to get you'll have to talk to Steve Bissett, but Steve paid me $1,500 on top of the whatever I was making 25 a page lettering or something like that. Rick fired me. He didn't pay me any royalties, but Steve paid me a royalty. He also paid Anthony Tollin, who did some coloring on Steve's 63 books. Anthony Tollin, if you don't know, Anthony Tollin worked in the production department at DC. He was a colorist. He was a proofreader, and he went on to found a company. He reprinted all the Maxwell Grant Shadow books. He reprinted all the Doc Savage books. And I keep running into Anthony. I only met him for the first time a few years ago at a show called Pulp Fest. So he's big in pulps and he's big in prose stories, and he's quite the consummate Renaissance man and editor. But Steve paid him a bonus on top of coloring, because they were doing the old style Murphy Anderson overlay flat coloring on newsprint for the 63 books. And Anthony knew how to do all that old stuff. He was a veteran. So we did get a bonus from Steve. Steve was a saint.
That's cool.
And except in Alan Moore's eyes, whatever. And again, Steve, I think Steve, whatever Steve said, it was probably honest. We still haven't been able to track down what pissed off Alan Moore, and nobody can verify this. It's all Alan wrote to me, and this was about In Pictopia, and he said he didn't want his name on In Pictopia because Fantagraphics was publishing. I said, why on earth would Fantagraphics published In Pictopia in 1987? I'm very proud of the story. It was the only thing, it was really our only collaboration. I drew a 13-page comic based on Alan's story, and I had help from Mike Gonzala, who penciled the bar room. No, he penciled the funny animal scene, and I had Pete Poplaski help me. He drew the bar room scene with all the classic newspaper strips, and Eric Vincent did a great job coloring it. And nobody reprinted it very well. But Fantagraphics had done a great job the first time, and they wanted to do it again in 2019, 2020. And I said, sure, this is great. This will be wonderful. And we found the original colors that Eric had, and we found the script. We wanted to publish the script and the comic together so people would see what a horrible job I did interpreting Alan Moore's script. Al said, no, I don't want my name on it. You don't have the rights to reprint the script. You can reprint the comic because you drew it, but make your money. But he didn't want his name on it. And I said, well, why on earth? And it stemmed from something that Steve Bissett said in an interview about 1963 in 1998. Apparently, Steve said something honest, and it pissed Alan off. And so he doesn't like Fantagraphics now, which is like, what did I have to do with this? I don't know what I had to do with I don't know what I had to do with it. I've been very proud of the story. I just tried to do a good job seeing to it that it was reprinted correctly. We didn't make any money.
I would like to do like a quick cut montage of all the creators who feel screwed over by Alan Moore saying, fuck Al, fuck Al, fuck Al.
Well, I met Alan Davis last year at a convention for the first time. And I met Dave Gibbons years ago. I haven't talked to Dave Gibbons recently. I think I met Eddie Campbell years ago, but I've never talked to him. But I know Steve. Steve has nothing good to say about Alan. I have my own experience with Alan. Alan Davis said, "Yeah, Alan's always been like that." Alan Davis is a very nice gentleman. But yeah, I don't, uh, what can I say?
I
I think, if you read my 1963 annual, my X amount of comics, if you read it in the right way, it's a Valentine to Alan Moore. I mean, he was a very influential mind in the 80s and 90s, and we all learned a lot about superheroes from it. So it's not testing his imagination or his importance. Just what the hell bug got up his ass? I don't know. I just don't know.
So tell the viewers, okay, so you started with the cover, then you started doing a couple of pages, but you said you didn't really know the story. So when did the story come to you? I mean, you went from a cover to 72 pages fairly quickly, and all things considered. So I mean, in terms of getting things done these days. So how did the
I
story
didn't
come to
bring my
mind?
artwork I don't have the artwork here, but I start out, the story starts out with a bunch of characters. They don't know where they came from. They don't know why they're there. I'm not trying to reconstruct what would have happened in the real 1963 annual. It's more like a Pirandello piece where the characters are, we're all on stage. Why are we here? How did we get here? And some of the characters don't even correspond to any of the 1963 characters. So they wander around, and I forget what happens. They run into then they run into the Splitting Image characters, which are my parodies of the Splitting Image of the Image characters. So they run into Youngblood and Wildcats and all that stuff, Spawn, Savage Dragon, my versions of those characters. And I kill them off in like 2 pages. So that's the end of the big cataclysmic fight scene. And then the Image founders show up. I don't think Jim Valentino cared for his depiction. I don't know. I haven't heard from Jim. But anyway, I have the Image founders show up, and I do a parody of On the Waterfront. I could have been a contender. I could have been a content provider. And then then the guilty parties get decapitated, and then what else happens? Oh, I have a little cameo uncredited with Del Close appearing. I don't name him, so I don't want to get into copyright disputes with DC. But Del Close was a comedian and a master of improvisational comedy, and he wrote Wasteland with John Ostrander. Mm-hmm. So I have a little nod to that. And then I have I forget what order. No, I'm forgetting. I have Paul Nabisco on the cross. So,
one of my favorite parts, by the way.
I have see Paul Nabisco was a character from Bizarre Heroes, and he even was earlier than that. I had a character without a name in Return of Megaton Man #3, which you did a video response. There's the Gamble Comics group, and there's a bullpen. Excuse me. There's a giant bullpen full of artists and writers, and they're all working for Bad Guy, and they're all drawing Megaton Man comics for Bad Guy. And one of them is a long-haired fellow with mirror sunglasses, and he's leading a rebellion, and he ends up getting fired. But that character becomes Paul Nabisco. And Paul Nabisco was always a parody of Alan Moore, mixed in with Steve Gerber, mixed in also with a character from a unproduced plot by Alan Moore, which I talked about. I don't know where I talk about that, but I've talked about it before, where there was a story that Alan Moore was going to do with Fantagraphics back in the 80s. It was never done, but there was a character named Byron Starkwinter, who is Byron Starkwinter was explicitly a parody of Steve Gerber. He's a conventional comic book writer who writes superheroes, takes a lot of drugs. He creates a character called Mookie the Worm. He ends up blowing his own jaw off with a firearm because he's tripping out, and basically Byron Starkwinter buys the whole fan adulation thing, and it drives him crazy. All these fans who love his work and find great significance in Mookie the Worm. So it's a kind of Alan Moore's pondering the life of Steve Gerber and Howard the Duck and how that would warp your mind, right? And it's kind of, it's becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, I think. It's unfortunate. So anyway, all those influences. So I'm Paul Nabisco is all these different references. But I used him in Bizarre Heroes. And so instead of doing a parody of Alan Moore and putting that into my comic, I just took Paul Nabisco. And I'm making this up as I go along. So I'm up to page 17, 18, 19. And I take my Paul Nabisco character, I put him on the cross. I have Gower Goose doing an MC thing. And then he comes down from the cross, and then he wanders off and he gets a laptop and he starts writing a script for the story. So he's taking over the 1963 annual. It's all, it follows a certain logic. But then I got to about page 20. This would have been spring of last year. I started doing a lot of shows. So I was doing a lot of traveling, and I was doing a lot of commissions for people. So I was interrupted, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to go straight through on the story. But I had a lot of time to think about it. And I met Alan Davis in the meantime, and I saw a lot of people. A lot of people really gave me a lot of encouragement. The kayfabe guys, I was right across the aisle from them at Heroes in South Carolina. They went through all my Xeroxes, and they were going, "Oh, this is going to be fantastic. You got to keep doing this." So then I came back, and it's like August, September, and I picked up where I left off, and I had by that point I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to do, and I had already introduced Paul Nabisco. I thought, well, I'm just going to bring in my own characters. I'm going to bring in Megaton Man, Ms. Megaton Man, Yarn Man. I'll just bring in all my characters, and it'll become a self-promotional exercise, because who's going to stop me? It's all mine to begin with. So I also have a Big Bang cameo appearance. I talked to Gary Carlson and Chris Ecker, and I asked for permission to do Night Watchman and Thunder Girl and
Yes.
Ultraman. So I have them come in, and I just booked all the boxes, and I just did a bunch of stuff. And there's a bunch of things people will scratch their heads, like what's Ms. Megaton Man doing in this storyline? What's the thing with her sister? There's all kinds of little loose ends. I bring in the Victory folks. And that was a bunch of public domain characters, and everybody's it's all about, I think I'm advancing the theme of universes, and what does it mean to be abandoned by your creator? And
Yeah.
what's it mean to be in the public domain and nobody cares about you, and that kind of stuff.
I invite people to just sort of go into it with an open mind, just sort of enjoy the ride and take it wherever you take us, because like it's just so deep and like dense, and just like, but not to discount the gorgeous art, because during the Paul Nabisco scenes, this is how my mind works. I'm like, oh my God, the perspective on this cross is really beautiful. And I love the way he drew the grain on the wood. And I think that, it's like you're so known as for your humor and your satire that, and obviously over the weeks, it's like, I absolutely love your art. And I just think that um, it's just a beautiful book on top of being like a fun event. I mean, it is an event.
Now, and the thing about this is all through the year, I was posting it on Facebook, and hopefully people, I think collectors are going to want the hard copy, right? So people saw me, I would post the lettering. Let me just show you a couple things here. This is for something else. This is for the next Victory folks. But I would post things like this, which is just a blank panels with hand lettering. And I would post that and people were like, wow, you're doing hand lettering, like old school. And then I would do the pencils and I'd scan those and post them, and then I would do the inks. And so people are getting involved in this. And I hope people enjoy the craft and they enjoy the artwork. But then Gary says, you're going to need to explain who these characters are. So you need notes in the back of the book. So I did a long document where I explain page 1, I introduce all these characters, and page 5 and page, I explain the reference to, the books of the Bible that I'm referencing. I mention who Edward Albee is. In case you don't know, he was a playwright in the 60s. He gets a mention. So I go through and I annotate everything. And I explain who the Big Bang characters are, and I explain who the Splitting Image characters are, and all that. And Pictopian characters. And then I wrote this essay, which is like an 6 or 8 or 9,000 word essay, which is I talk about my history of the 90s, and I talk about all these issues. And I'm interested in what you thought about that. Did you? And I have photographs of me and Rick and Steve and Larry Marder. And
I really like it. I'm so glad it's there. It's like I feel like it's like if anyone watching doesn't follow Don on Facebook, then you're under 30 and don't have Facebook. But it's like it's such a joy to see all the art that you post and things like that. And I love all the pictures you've been posting of the fiasco paper hats that you got people to wear at conventions, like other creators and stuff over the years. I think it's very important. There's like a huge, rich history behind the entire, like, I can see like a new comic, like, like a kayfaber, like a young kayfaber who doesn't necessarily know who Don Simpson is going to want this comic book. So I'm glad that there's like this sort of history in there, and like, like an explanation, if you will. It's a beautiful book. Is it going to be standard comic book size? I feel like it should be larger, but it should be hardback. But
it's going to be slightly larger. It's going to actually be slightly larger. So you're telling me I should start a YouTube channel if I really want to reach people.
I don't know. Well, actually, if you really want to reach people, you should start TikTok. But I don't know if the world is ready for Don Simpson's TikTok. I don't even know what that would look like, but of course, I would be totally down for it. So, one thing you mentioned earlier, and I think it is a crime against nature, and you probably won't be able to comment on this, but it's a shame you don't have a better relationship with Todd McFarlane, because I would love to see a Megaton Man action figure. Like, he is like, has there never been a Megaton Man action figure?
I take a couple hitting shots at Todd, but no, the Todd McFarlane, I did a Spawn pinup for a meddler Spawn pinup for Spawn 16, and they gave me permission to run it in my omnibus.
Oh, cool.
So I'm in good terms with Todd. I don't have a problem with Todd.
Oh, that's good.
I don't know if you can reach him. I don't know if I'm not into the toy thing, so I don't know if that's even feasible. There was always the problem with Megaton Man is his little ankles. He would bend over, it'd break over. His little ankles would break for that big body. But yeah.
Well,
I'm in.
what about, those Funko Pops, the thing with the little things with the big heads? They always fall over, so he'd be kind of perfect for that. Well, there, I was going to ask you about something super important. Oh yeah, I remember now. Okay, so you had mentioned your splitting image characters make an appearance in the 1963 annual, and you kill them off. Does that include the Savage Drag Queen?
Well, everything happens in silhouette, so you don't really see who the characters are. They all just kind of end up. You kind of the lights go back on, and you see a bunch of bodies laying around.
No, I would, with all the controversy over banning drag queens, I would love to see you and Eric do a Savage Drag Queen one shot or backup story and dragon.
Oh, you're
I'm
right.
available. I'm available to draw it if you just want to write it, and your commentary on how the Savage Drag Queen would deal with this. For God's sakes, I mean, I feel like that's the only drag queen, the most famous drag queen character available, if only in parody.
I hadn't thought of that. That's I have to exploit that.
You
Uh,
definitely have to exploit that. I'm your like low-key like PR manager anyway, just doing it for free because I'm insane, and I want the world to know the genius of Don Simpson.
the Savage Dragon, he's got to hit to Florida. He's
Right?
got to has to have
Absolutely. It has to happen.
Disney World and the Savage Drag Queen. That's
I'm,
perfect. That's gonna produce a story idea somewhere.
there you go. Mission accomplished. I'm planting seeds in the
Wheels
universe.
are turning. Wheels are turning already.
I mean, how could you not? I speaking of your, I guess that sort of ties into your other favorite British author, J.K. Rowling. You know, and it's so funny because you had mentioned working at Borders bookstore in your afterword. And I know from other articles that that is where you first consumed or were exposed to the phenomenon of Harry Potter, correct?
Yeah. Well, going back, let's give you a little snapshot. I'd done comics in the 80s and 90s, and toward the end of the 90s, I was out of comics, and I hadn't quite made up my mind if I wanted to go back to school. But I got a part-time job at Borders selling books, and I figured, first of all, if you're a has-been comic book artist, and the best job you can get is like $7 an hour at Borders, then you start thinking about school. So I ended up going back to college, but in the meantime, in the early 2000s, I was doing 20 hours a week at Borders, and I must have handled 20,000 copies of Harry Potter because they were literally just flying out the door. And if you weren't alive at that time, if you weren't into the midnight parties, I didn't read any of it. But all of my fellow employees were deep into it, and they were responsible collectively. They were responsible for making J.K. Rowling who she is, because they were selling it to everybody. They were pushing it on everybody, displays on top of the New York Times bestseller list and everything else. And literally everybody that walked in the door, if they could read, if they were 8 years old or they were 80 years old, they were waiting for the next Harry Potter. And I can remember those days very vividly. I was like, when is the next Harry Potter? And we would be at the information desk in the middle of the store, and we'd say, well, just a minute, we'll call London and find out when it's coming. Like we didn't know. But I was there for 4, 5, and 6, and I never read a sentence of it. And but it was it was a license to print money. I mean, the reason, it's no mistake that Borders went bankrupt after 3 years after the last Harry Potter, because they really got addicted to those big events, big infusions of cash. And when Harry Potter came to an end, that was, Border Worlds couldn't keep it together, because they wanted that dragon book or that, elf book or Cassandra Clare's, Mortal Instruments or something like that. Just didn't fill that cash infusion. So they ended up going bankrupt. But you have to explain that to people now. It wasn't just a kid's book. I mean, literally everybody was reading it. And it was a literary phenomenon. And my coworkers, not me, but my coworkers, they were the early adopters. They're the ones who brought it out of the kids section, put it in the middle of the store, made everybody read it. And the movies followed and everything else followed. And it was really a phenomenon. But none of those people that I know, I spent a weekend. I'm wearing the Montgomery County Community College. I did an event there earlier this month. And I was hosted by a couple of super fans. Their house is filled with graphic novels, and the young lady Amanda Powers. She was a big Harry Potter fan. She read all the books when they came out, and she feels personally betrayed. And everybody I know that was a part of that phenomenon back in the day. If I run into an old acquaintance that was a coworker at Borders, or if I just meet anybody, they just want to change the subject. They don't want to talk about J.K. Rowling. They don't want to talk about Harry Potter. And and here's the funny thing. And I'll say to somebody, I'll say, did you see what she wrote last week on Twitter? And it's like, no, they haven't paid attention to it for 2 years. She's canceled. She's dead to a whole bunch of people. Now, I don't know about. I'm sure there's still parents buying Harry Potter for their kids, and grandparents are buying Harry Potter for their kids and grandkids and stuff. I'm sure there's still people reading her stuff, but the people in the trade, the people that run the bookstores, I haven't seen a display of J.K. Rowling in a year and a half. I go to half-price books. They don't, they have them. They have them off to the side. Barnes and Noble, the employees really determine what they push under this new leadership at Barnes and Noble. Barnes and Noble now is a lot more like Borders used to be. They're much more bookish, much more catering to a reader type of mentality, and they don't push Rowling at all. I mean, she has her sales. She has her first day sales. I saw one copy of Ink Black Heart, and it was on a return cart like 3 weeks after it came out. It was being pulled and sent back. I don't see those things. She's just lost enormous ground with the people that I know, and I know a lot of people in fandom. I just got an email from Melissa Anelli, and she's a super Harry Potter fan. She's with the Leaky Con. She's with the Potter cast. And I sent them an email because they had a broken link on their Pottercast. And she sent me a nice email back. And I said, I think you guys should just leave this thing behind. Talk about, because they did the most recent Harry Potter cast. We're totally off on, forget about 1963 now. But I can't talk about this with comic book fans because they don't read books without pictures on every page. But I emailed Melissa because their latest podcasts are not even about Harry Potter. They talk about the Last of Us. They talk about TV shows. They talk about binge watching stuff. And I said, you should just keep doing that, because this Harry Potter thing's not coming back. J.K. Rowling's not coming back. You ought to just talk about fandom of whatever you're interested in. If it's a TV show, if it's Cassandra Clare, Mortal Instruments, if it's science fiction, fantasy, if it's a TV show, if it's a movie, just talk about what you want to talk about. I said, follow your bliss. Joseph Campbell, follow your bliss. Don't, because it's not fun. And she wrote back, and she wrote nice emails. Thank you, because that's what we want to do. We want to keep doing more stuff. It's just not fun being in the Harry Potter business anymore. And she's in it up to her eyeballs. She runs a Potter, and she runs the longest running Harry Potter podcast, and she runs LeakyCon. She's not the only one, but she's got a group of people, and that's what they do. And she said, yeah, it's not fun anymore. It's just not fun anymore. I said, well, follow your bliss, dude. Do other things. I wasn't suggesting myself. You could go into Megaton Man fandom. You could go in, well, you Alan Moore. You go into his, whatever his latest thing. So I wasn't promoting myself, but I was just saying, do other stuff, develop other interests, science fiction, fantasy, other authors, because it's just, if it's not fun, it's not fun. So and it's a real phenomenon, and people don't understand why I'm obsessed with it, but I saw it at a particular stage as an employee at Borders, and it's unprecedented in the annals of fandom. I mean, could you imagine like Doctor Who fandom having that kind of a scandalous situation, or Star Trek fandom, or Star Wars, or I mean, people are used to H.P. Lovecraft. He's dead. He's an old racist. Robert E. Howard was a racist. Edgar Rice Burroughs was whatever kind of Confederate ideology he had, or whatever, I mean, all these fantasy is regressive, right? Fantasy is always primal, regressive. It's the dark part of our imaginations, but people partake of it because they want to escape from their own problems. People don't care about Alan Moore's beef with Hollywood. They want the 1963 characters. That's my point. People want escape. They want the end of the story. They don't care about your issues with lawyers and your issues with Alan Davis and Dave Gibbons and beyond, before Watchmen or whatever. They're not interested in your feud with Steve Bissette. They want the end of the story. And it's astonishing to me that people get so full of themselves, Alan and Joe, if I can be familiar with them. Those Al and Joe, JK and Alan Moore. I mean, who cares? It's a full-time job keeping up with all the people that they're griping about. People just want a story, Michael. They just want to read a freaking comic book and forget about their own problems.
Well, it's like, but we as society has like created this problem anyway. It's like you love someone's work, so it's not good enough just to enjoy the work. Then you have to know like their motivation, or who they are, or what they have for breakfast or whatever. And like, who cares?
It's you interviewers, right?
I know. As I said that, I realized that I'm part of the problem.
Yeah, well, nobody wants to listen to me. They want to just look at my artwork, which is fine. That's what they should be doing. So
there's at least 145 people who want to listen to you.
Wow, that's nice.
So
if we can sell 145 copies of the book, that'll be great. That'll be fantastic.
Oh, I think honestly, I feel like it will be a success. I feel like it should be a success because it's not, I mean, it's an event book. There's a lot of hype around it, and there would be reason enough to buy it, like based on the hype and just the nature of its origin. But I feel like it's a quality book on top of that. So it's like you're backing it up. It's not just, fluff or something.
I just want to be part of the conversation, Michael. I just want to be part of the conversation. People think about these ideas. That I'll be happy. And if a few people get pissed off, I'll be really happy.
Well, I mean, I do think you have skin in the game. I guess that's debatable, but so we have the 1960 or the Fuck Al X amount of comics coming out possibly in August. The Megaton Man Omnibus, you've production wise, you're done with that, right? You've scanned all the art and
I scanned all of it. Now that's in the hands of the designers. That's probably, I'm thinking it's probably more like November, December. So it's like a Christmas gift kind of thing. It's 2 volumes. So there's going to be volume 1, which is the Megaton Man kitchen sink years, more or less. All the stuff that you've covered, basically. So Megaton Man 1 through 10, Return of Megaton Man 1, 2, and 3, Yarn Man, X Them's, Tyranno Man. I don't know if you got to Tyranno Man yet.
No, it's super expensive. I'm trying to track it down.
Really?
Damn you. Some of the things, like I'm
Yeah,
also trying to track King Kong
I
is
used to
pretty
have a
expensive.
few boxes of those. It's too bad. Well, you'll get it all in order, and the thing about it is, talking about fake number ones. I hated the fact that we did all these number ones. I wanted to keep the numbering, even if it was only, Megaton Man 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, even if it was once every year and a half. And I'm glad that they are being brought together in order so you can read the whole thing, because really I wasn't doing number ones. I really wasn't doing a restart or reboot. I was trying to tell an ongoing story. I was just doing it with I had other things I needed to do to pay the bills, because the bottom fell out of the market at the time. So I'm glad that they're being brought together. So that's volume 1, the kitchen sink years, and then I told kitchen sink to go to hell. Then it was my self-published stuff, which is volume 2, which will be Bizarre Heroes. And originally I was trying to do everything but Megaton Man. I don't know if you haven't talked about the Bizarre Heroes series. Those are real expensive, aren't they?
Actually, you should mention, I almost have a complete set. I have the most amazing viewers. One of my viewers sent me a couple of issues of Bizarre Heroes that I was missing. I think I might be only missing like maybe 17, or like, which is like super expensive, but I have almost a complete set. And after, like, I will be starting Bizarre Heroes after this Monday, which will be this interview.
Well, God love you. God love you. Well, so I mean, Bizarre Heroes was originally I was trying to expand the Megaton Man universe, but then all the Megaton Man characters ended up taking it over. So we're calling it Megaton, the complete Megaton Man universe, volume 1, volume 2, and volume 2 is the Bizarre Heroes series plus Megaton Man Zero, which is number 17. Megaton Man versus Forbidden Frankenstein, which is number 16 in the Bizarre Heroes. And all the Savage Dragon backup feature stuff, the weekly serial. I did in the late 90s, I was doing a weekly half of the comic book page. And so we're going to reprint all those. That we might hold that material off for a third volume, but that's to be determined. But we're doing volume 1, volume 2, hopefully later this year, and then a year from now.
I forget, is Megaton Man versus or Savage Dragon part of this, or
no? No, I am going to run a couple pages from it. I have photocopies of the artwork that I did before I sent them to Eric. So I'm going to run like 2 or 3 pages with blank view screens. Eric's never really expressed any interest in reprinting that. He doesn't consider it part of the Dragon continuity. I got my money out of it, so I can't complain. I'm not worried about it. I don't think anybody can find the digital files, so it would have to be some kind of a
horrible scanning of the
yeah, it might
version.
not reproduce real well.
Yeah.
And I sold all, I got half of the book, and I sold all the originals, except for 2 or 3 that I own. So that were mostly my characters. Actually, that it's funny that speaking of one shots, there was actually a little bit of a view into my world. I have the Megatropolis Quartet. I have the Phantom Jungle Girl is a member of the Megatropolis Quartet with Rubber Brother and Yarn Man, and that's become a real major part of my narrative, even though it was just kind of a page and a half in the team up. I've had to explain that period when, so it's a significant moment in the Megaton Man universe. But yeah, no plans to reprint that. Splitting Image got reprinted in 2017. Jim Valentino is going to reprint the Normal Man, Megaton Man.
Awesome. He's doing an omnibus, right? Yeah.
And he's going to lose a lot of money. he's totally recoloring it, totally relettering it, and remastering it, and so he's doing that. I offered X amount of comics to Image, and Eric and Jim, and they didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Interesting.
So, whatever. But
I have a comic book that I ordered called the Megaton Man hard copy. I think there's 1 and 2. I only have 1 so far, but I feel like it might be a collection of the digital comics you mentioned. Is that correct, or do you not know off the top of your head?
It's a bit of this weekly serial in black and white, and it's also it's a serialized Megaton Man story that I did for Rob Liefeld's Maximum Press. There's a series that he did called Asylum, which is black and white, and so I think it's that material in the first issue of hard copy.
But I have to say, like, doing this week after week and reading these issues, I just am so in love with this universe, and I think it's so hilarious. And we talk about your satire and your love of, like, I feel like you were drawn to the superhero universe because that was sort of your first love of comic books, and I think your depth understanding of it, like, as a superhero fan, like, I feel like I'm getting a sort of double experience on the satire level, because I instantly feel like I see the sort of satire that you're hitting at. Like, you're always hitting on something, like, whether it be secret identity, like, the ridiculousness of, like, everybody knowing, his secret identity, but he thinks it's a secret, you know what I mean? Even though it's obvious to everyone else. Like, I just sort of like the peeling away the layers of the onion. It's like, you have a great way of making, like, just showing everything for its ridiculousness and making it so entertaining at the same time.
Well, I think you read the interview. You did a dramatic reading. I've never seen that done on YouTube, but you did a dramatic reading of the Return of Megaton Man interview. And I explained in there, that when I was a kid, when I was 5 years old, that was when Adam West Batman show was on primetime TV. And then they started running the Superman reruns, the George Reeve Superman reruns from the 50s. And so I would dress up and I'd pin a towel to my sweatshirt and I would roll it up and I'd turn the shirt inside out and I'd roll it up. There used to be a TV show called there was some TV show back in the day where the guy, he had a suit coat that he would turn inside out and would become a superhero uniform, and he'd have wings. It was the guy from St. Elsewhere, great actor. But I would do that. I would have my shirt and I'd have a towel pinned to it. I'd turn it inside out, roll the towel up, and it looked like I had a hunchback. And then my mom would be washing dishes in the kitchen, and I'd walk through the kitchen and I'd say, "Hello, Lois." She'd play Lois, and I would be Superman, or I'd be Clark Kent, but she wasn't looking at which one I was. And she was just washing dishes, and she said, "Well, hi, Superman." I said, "No, I'm Clark." And all I did was I just took that and I just made that the situation in Megaton Man #1, where Trent Flug is wearing his costume under his suit. He's this enormously muscled guy. He's got a hunchback. He's wearing his his visor. He's wearing his cowl under his hat. I remember showing this to Mike Gazala, and he saw the original artwork was just outline drawings. And then when he saw the book in color, he goes, "Hey, wait a minute. You know, Megaton Man's wearing his costume under his street clothes, and you can see it." And I said, "Yeah, that was the whole point." It's like, oh, he didn't get the joke until he saw it in color, because then you see the blue of his cowl. Are those fish behind you? You got an aquarium, I just
I
noticed.
do, yeah. You know,
Amazing.
I have to have some sort of background in
Someday you'll have a giant
my
wall-to-wall.
makeshift studio.
You'll have a wall-to-wall aquarium with exotic fish in it.
I will. I would love that. I would love to have a saltwater aquarium with sharks in it. I love sharks. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, think, okay, so what do you feel? Okay, so we have the omnibi coming out. And I feel like you had mentioned like more Megaton Man coming. I was thinking about it. It's like, I'm now being introduced to his child. His child was finally born at the end of Megaton Man, and he's a baby. So will he grow up? Will he become I love the golden age Megaton Man so much. He is like the biggest surprise of like my favorite thing from the return of Megaton Man. So hysterical. I just love everything about the golden age Megaton Man. But it occurred to me, since we have his kid and everything, will he grow up to be the new Megaton Man? Have you thought of telling that story?
Before we get into that, I should probably mention, I showed you a page of the Victory folks. I'm finishing that up. That's the next thing. And the Victory folks they play a cameo in X amount. They're my public domain, Stardust and Phantoma and all these characters.
So the Victory folks, what is that? Tell everyone, what is that?
They're gonna
it's part of another book, right?
Well, they do have a cameo in my 1963 annual, and then at the end of this story, which I just finished lettering it yesterday, so then I have to draw it. But this is a pencil page. I've been posting these. You can see Stardust and the stars, and I don't know how well that is showing up on the camera.
No, I can see it.
I'm going to finish that. That's my month of April. Hopefully I'll have that in hand at the end of that. And then I want to go back and I've got, basically this will lead into more Megaton Man. The X amount of comics is going to lead into more Megaton Man. And I've got a whole bunch of ideas for new Megaton Man stories. So I'm trying to, all of these different projects are going to funnel into this universe. It'll basically be Bizarre Heroes 2, but I'm eager to explain what happens to Simon, the son of Megaton Man. And that's the interesting thing about X amount of comics. The essay at the end I talk about the see-through girl hooking up with Megaton Man and the Watchmen and all that stuff. And I'm also visually slipping in a little bit of the origin story of Simon, because that was how Simon came to be. Megaton Man and the see-through girl go on patrol, and they wind up with a little baby. And that's how babies are made. I don't know if you can say that in Florida either these days, but that,
I mean, if you're afraid of the David's penis, I don't know what to tell you. So
so all of that is talk about making it up as I went along. I had really no inkling about what I was doing. I just thought it'd be funny that Megaton Man would hook up with the see-through girl. I thought it'd be a funny idea. And then a few months later, she shows up, she's pregnant. And then Megaton Man loses his powers and he goes to Ann Arbor and the whole thing. So I've done a lot of work on writing prose. Speaking of J.K. Rowling's influence, I was under the influence of Harry Potter, and I was trying to do a young adult book, but I couldn't keep it young adult. It's too perverted. So I've been writing. I wrote about 500,000 words of Ms. Megaton Man narrating the Megaton Man universe. And I went back and I wasn't trying to do retcons, but I retold all those stories through the viewpoint of Clarissa, Ms. Megaton Man. And she's kind of a peripheral character in the comics. She's only in and out a few times, but I thought she would be the perfect first person narrator. And so she talks about Ann Arbor and Megaton Man when he doesn't have his powers, and the baby gets born, and the see-through girl becomes the Earth Mother, and all that. So I've been thinking a lot about that narrative, kind of again, not trying to retcon it, but trying to make sense of it, to rationalize it, and revise it here and there. But I have a whole timeline worked out now, and I know what year it is, and I know when people were born, and I know where all this falls into place. And the X amount, even this X amount of comics, this little allegorical side trip into this weird multi-mentions, I have that all figured out. And after that's all done, yeah, I'm looking forward, hopefully this summer, doing new stuff that carries on after that. And Simon will be about 10 or 11 years old. His cousin is the same age, and they live in the Doomsday Factory, which is show this at the end of X amount of comics. That's the headquarters of the Devengers. I have a whole explanation of how they came to be known as the Devengers. I have a whole thing with World War II. I have this really convoluted, complex backstory that I've worked out, and it's all based on these comics that I was making up as I went along, but I filled in the gaps. So hopefully people will find this entertaining, but I'm really looking forward to doing that.
I know, like, I think it's pretty amazing that you were making up a lot of it as you went along, because sometimes some of the greatest things come out of that. And I think one of the greatest things to come out of your X amount of comics is Limberlass, and I hope we see her again. Like, I don't, just the name alone is like so great, but I love the fact that she has 4 legs and no arms. Like, I'm just like,
well, she does have arms. She does get arms by the end of the story, but yeah. Well, here's the thing about creating comics, Michael, is if it takes twice as long, 3 times, 4 times as long to draw it. And there were times when I was doing Megaton Man #1, I was literally starting in the upper left corner. I would start a panel, and by the time I drew that, then I knew what the next panel was. There were some pages where I literally did not know what the whole page was going to be. I do tend to write plot outlines now, and I tend to write scripts. So I have much more of a longer view of the narrative. But especially at the kitchen sink years, I was doing 1 issue, and while I was drawing it, hopefully I would have ideas for the next issue when I was done. But I didn't have any further view down the road than that. I had no 300 issue storyline or Dave Sim kind of plan or anything like that. So I was working on getting this book out, and then hopefully by the time I drew it and inked it and it went off to the printer, hopefully I would sit down and write the next one. So all of this is, I think you're always, the thing about writing is that you're always making it up as you go along.
True.
The wonderful thing about prose is that you get to go back and you get to revise it. If you've written a document, you can go in and cut and paste, and you can go back and fix it up. In my case, I was doing 1 issue at a time, and then it would be published, and then I was stuck with it. You're stuck with you don't want to betray the readers and say, oh, you know, the last issue I screwed it up and let's rearrange it and I'll kill it. You know, I killed off a character accidentally. Now I'm going to bring the character back. You know, you paint yourself into a corner continually when you're doing that. But I now have a lot longer view. But like I said, I look at those comics now and I read them now and I'm asking myself, well, what happened in between? What happened between this issue and that issue? What happened before? What happened after? Whatever happened to the Megaton mice? So hopefully, and I have a complete graphic novel, which I should be coloring. Hopefully that will come out from Fantagraphics after the Omnibi. So I'm still working on that. That's complete. That's a completely drawn, partially colored, 160-page graphic novel. So hopefully that will be an additional project. So buy X amount of comics, buy the omnibus, and hopefully and tell Gary Groth that you love him for getting into the Megaton Man business, and hopefully he will keep doing it. At least once a year we'll have something come out, maybe once or twice a year, and hopefully we'll get caught up. That's my hope.
Well, that's good. I'm so glad that all this is happening. As I predicted, the year of Don Simpson is happening. You know, we've got lots of great stuff to look for from you, past and future. Like I said, I know. Like, so who could reprint the King Kong book? Would that ever happen?
Oh, that's all tied up. That's all tied up. I think Joe DeVito had the rights to King Kong. I don't know what I haven't talked to him lately. He's not interested in reprinting my stuff. So hopefully we'll see. You know.
Yeah.
This is my Pro coffee mug.
Awesome. Are you going to a convention this weekend? Or
next convention I have, this is March 30th. We're shooting this March 31st. I have a show. I go to Ithacon April 22nd. So nothing until then. I have a bunch of commissions and stuff to do. And victory, folks.
Awesome.
So be at the drawing board.
And
all right, I think we're running out of gas here. So good talking to you, Michael.
Good talking to you, Don Simpson. It was nice to catch up with you.
Mondays.
And
the Megaton Man Mondays. And if you find any other interviews, did you have a copy of the New Age comics? Was that you? Was that somebody else?
No, it was me. It was me.
Okay, you can do a dramatic reading of that.
Okay, actually, I will. Yeah, I know. I'm always looking for new and creative ways to keep the Megaton Man Monday machine going. So I know I was thinking, because when it switches to Bizarre Heroes, at least it's starring Megaton Man. So I feel like Megaton Man is your legacy, and is if I'm doing something Don Simpson, it falls under the umbrella of Megaton Man Mondays. Hopefully, that's my bullshit answer, but hey, I'm sticking to it. And I really want to see that Savage Drag Queen Goes to Florida story. So hopefully we get to see some of that. And I know, keep on drawing, and I know you will. And we'll catch up with you when as needed for future exciting announcements. The book looks amazing. I cannot wait to, I mean, I've pretty much read it. I've seen all the art and stuff. But like you said, I want the hard copy because, just doing my show and stuff and reading digital comics when need be, I just so prefer having the hard copy in hand. I mean, especially when you love the art, you know what I mean? It's been such a joy to look at all those old Megaton Man comic books, and they're just it's like a time capsule, you know what I mean? It's representative of the nature of the printing of indie comics at the time and things like that, and all your experimentation with the colors and stuff. It's just been such a joy, and I love Megaton Man. I love Don Simpson comics. And thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to update us on your controversial new afterword for X amount of comics.
Unsettling, my heretical afterword. All right, great talking to you.
All right, Don. Take
Yeah,
care.
NFT. We'll talk later.
All right.
Bye.
Don. Bye.